Morgan, the feature writer for the Marriage Initiative. I'm pleased to introduce Chris and Linda Padgett to you today. The Padgetts have spent the past 2 decades translating the Catholic Church's theology into real-world application for couples. Married 33 years with 9 children and 8 grandchildren, they empower couples to live out the Church's vision for marriage and family with their Sanctify Your Marriage tool and 3 books: Not Ready for Marriage, Not Ready for Sex, One Couple's Return to Chastity, Holy Marriage, Happy Marriage, Faith-Filled Ways to a Better Relationship, and Marriage and Ministry. Chris holds a master's degree in theology from the Franciscan University of Steubenville and a licentiate in sacred theology from the International Marian Research Institute. He's currently a professor of theology at Catholic International University. Linda is an author and mental health counselor with a certificate in spiritual direction from the Cynical School of Spiritual Direction. She is pursuing her PhD in traumatology. They recently launched the Chris and Linda YouTube show and podcast. Chris and Linda, thank you so much for being here.
Wow,
yeah,
thank you.
Yeah, it's a nice little
I know. I can't wait to hear what we have to say.
Oh, I'm just so glad I got through all those titles. they were a mouthful, but I'm so glad and you have earned them and worthy of being said. So I'm glad that
Very kind.
we're able to introduce you. But let's talk a little bit about how you got started in this ministry world, and then how that kind of morphed into Holy Marriage, Happy Marriage.
Yeah.
Right. So a long time ago, well, really, Linda and I, we've been talking about ministry since we were in high school and college, really. I mean, we had a pretty radical kind of conversion, and we wanted to give our life to the Lord fully. And so in the early years, it just kind of was simple things like walking down the street and sharing the story of God's love with people who are struggling with drugs or alcohol, to really majoring in theology. That's kind of what I was doing, and being a real active participant in our campus ministry at the university we were at. And I think at some point I just knew that I was being called to do ministry full time, and so I did. I started a band, and the band was pretty successful. And then I realized, what I love most about this is talking about the faith. And so Linda and I really just looked at our family and that ministry as this kind of united front of going out and doing what we felt like God had called us to do.
Yeah. So I think from the very beginning, we've always been united in this vision of serving God together. And what that looks like for each of us individually has changed and evolved through the years, and what it looks like for us together. So Chris doing the solo ministry for many decades, and then gradually I joined him as the children got older. I would do more and more with him as talks, and then we started writing together. And so it's really been this very slow progression, but it makes sense because as we've aged and our children have grown, we have more to talk about. We keep it relevant.
Yeah.
Well, you were not just sitting around eating bonbons. Raising 9 children is a project in itself.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something that too, as you talked about, now that you've had kind of some years of experience in that. But you going back, first of all, when you were talking about being in the band, you kind of started giving a message to teens and kids, and you really realized the way to reach kids was through their family, and the way to talk about Jesus was through your life, correct?
Yeah, ultimately I realized I was never going to be somebody else. Like at the end of the day, I had to be decidedly myself, whether it was musically or even in the stories I was telling. We had a lot of influences and maybe musical heroes or speaking heroes, but I could never do that justice. So I wanted to see what did it look like for me to have a voice. And so when we started to share our story for teens with chastity and things of that nature, what we had a story. We had a story of what God had done in our life, and we had a story about how God took us from promiscuity to purity. And that was a story that we realized was resonating with people wherever they were at. And so it was kind of exciting for me, I think, to realize that, yes, God gave me gifts and talents with music, but he gave me gifts and talents with storytelling. And what better way than to tell that story with the person that I loved most, love present tense most, not love most
still
currently.
that's a good thing.
Also.
Continual, right? Like one of
That's
those,
right.
you know, when you read in the Bible about the different ways, there's the continual tense.
That's right. Past, present, and continuous. That's right.
Well, and that kind of story, your beginning story, kind of was that not ready for marriage, not ready for sex book that kind of started your writing and speaking journey, correct?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of us together, yes. But even preceding that, I would do some speaking things or music things and share stories. So I was pretty well versed in, you know, a public discourse and presentation. But I think in some ways, Linda, who always felt like what she was doing with, you know, raising the kids and being present at the ministry events, she always felt that that was ministry for her too.
Yeah.
It turned a corner when we started doing that together. And I think what's kind of funny is that Linda's super type A, and this is going to shock you, but I wasn't. So I wasn't type A. And as a result, we had to figure out what did it look like for us together to present. So we kind of figured out how to do that. And it's been an awesome journey because I think that the talks have gotten better the more that we've worked together.
Right. Yeah. Like, I think it is important to know that it's been such a slow growth of more and more being together. When we first started doing talks together, it was primarily about dating because we were still pretty young, but now we're very comfortable talking and addressing marriage and family life because we're much more seasoned than we were when we first started talking. Yeah. So, yes, but Chris still to this day, I mean, Chris, the majority of the ministry, like getting out there and doing talks is still by Chris by himself. More so than me with him. I occasionally go with him. We do a lot of things this way virtually together, but that's his primary focus.
And you do teach at your parish, right? The pre-Cana classes and things to the pre-married classes.
Right. We do all the pre-Cana classes for the whole diocese of Syracuse and for the diocese of Newark, New Jersey. So we do those virtually and we do the ones locally here in person. So, we do a lot together still, but the traveling is more often than not Chris on his own.
Yeah, but gosh, the whole two dioceses, not just a parish, two whole dioceses.
Mm-hmm.
Well, one of the things that make you such a great pre-Cana teachers is that experience. And you talked about kind of that led into your content for Holy Marriage, Happy Marriage. Let's unpack that. Let's share what we can learn from your experience.
I think what happened was I was asked when I was at Franciscan University to teach a class on marriage. And part of that was me putting together content. And I wanted to have something that was super practical and tangible. And so I thought, you know, let's connect the dots with the virtues, cardinal and theological virtues, and how does that look? And so Linda and I, we kind of took those principles and ideas and we made them very personal and our own. So for example, you know, the theological virtues, faith, hope, and charity, what does that look like? And, you know, to believe in one another and to have dreams together and to provide freedom to be that individual and that couple that we're called to be. So those kind of connect the dots, practical, tangible, familiar virtues, you know, are grounded in these faith-filled, theologically rich virtues. And the cardinal virtues with prudence, temperance, fortitude, you know, that kind of stuff, justice. What we realized is that this worked across the board, whether someone was getting married or even dating for that matter. And it worked for people who had been married 5 years to 50 years. And we've done that when we've done our events. Within that crowd, there might be couples who've been married for 30, 40, 50 years and couples who just got married that month. So is there a way to do a talk, a presentation that would resonate? And this talk for us that we built the book Holy Marriage, Happy Marriage on is that kind of a talk that resonates with people, because no matter where you are in your relationship, you know that justice, which connects to dignity and respect, that matters. But how that looks is different. In the early years, it's effortless to extend to each other dignity and respect. But after you've been together for so long, it can sometimes be something that you forget. I call it a slow erosion problem, that dignity and respect. But so that's kind of really the heart of it.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah,
You told me about an example, as we kind of think about, let's bring this down to the details. I'm a detail person. I'm like, you gave an example of how you translated believing in each other. And I really liked, it was an example from the pandemic, but I think it still rings true. Would you share that with our marriage champions?
Yeah. So I think that through all the years, we have been each other's greatest advocates and greatest cheerleaders. I know that I've poured my life into helping him succeed, and he has poured his life into cheerleading me and helping me succeed. And we kind of have our lanes almost in which we do well in these lanes. Well, the pandemic turned all that on end because it was, the closure of anything public. And what Chris does for a living is he travels around the world into public locations and just speaking, sharing the gospel. And so that was completely stopped. So a whole year plus really worth of income and jobs was completely taken away. So after a slight panic, we decided, okay, we live on a farm. We're going to be okay. Let's just make this happen. God's going to take care of us. And that was one of the things that on the farm, I'm the brain who can look at something and know how to fix it. I can build something in my head many times before I actually build it. I've learned to have the skill of the building to go along with the way my brain sees things and does things. So in our house, we've lived in here for 10 years, most of the work in the house, the flooring, the drywall, the decorating, I've built it. I've done it. Anything that wasn't plumbing or electric, I've done. And,
Wow.
And so with the animals, same thing. I know how to, I don't know, like I'm the one who studies and reads up on how to take care of these animals and rotational grazing and all that. But there was a moment in the pandemic where I looked outside and I saw Chris. He decided to take the initiative. I'm going to do this. I'm going to go and move these pigs to this location. And he had in his mind what he was doing. And I remember looking out the window going, what is he doing? Why is he doing it that way? That's not the way to do it. I've read it. I know how you're supposed to do this. That's not what he's supposed to do. And I just felt like the Lord said, Linda, hands off. Let him do it. Let him do it. And so we tell people in this talk, when this point of believe in one another, it's more than just, hey, you got this. You're a strong person. You can do this, even though that's important. The words are very important. But there's something about letting go of control. And for some people, one usually more than the other, there's a control issue that you have to let go of that control and allow the person to step into something that maybe you feel like you're better at, something that maybe you're worried that they don't quite have, but the trust that it's okay. It's okay to let them try and explore and try something different and to be that cheerleader for each other. Yeah.
Well, and now after you raised the 9 children, and the picture on your website is absolutely beautiful of your lovely, lovely family and the growing grandchildren. Now you're going back to get your PhD. Yeah.
Again, this is that I think that I have natural gifts and talents, but it's the support from my partner. Chris has been so encouraging and loving and empowering that we've run into people who are there where maybe men are afraid of strong women, or like, again, we must, even though we've been married for 30 years, we have to stay in our lane. You got to always be this way, and you need to always be this way. And we always think you got to be open, giving each other freedom to grow and to learn. So that has been one of his many gifts to me, is that freedom and that encouragement to be able to say, go for it. And so when the Lord said to me, go back to school and get your master's, I was like, okay. And he was like, all right, absolutely. When I was debating, do I want to go on for my PhD? He was like, absolutely. Why wouldn't you? So even though people think I might have 3 heads and think I'm crazy for doing it, he's the one who's like, no, this is right. This is great. So we just have to keep empowering each other, because we're like, what did we say the other day? I was like, the world might think we're absolutely crazy. Our kids probably will one day look at us and go, they were crazy. But oh well, that's okay.
Yeah, it's interesting because I was just thinking about this, that I grew up in a home. It was a single family home. So my mother raised my sister and I saw her do a lot of roles that were stereotypically, the masculine role. I mean, she had nobody else in her life to do it. And I think what I realized early on with Linda was that, like, she's first of all, obviously out of my league, and I'm, I'm married up, and we're certain that she has a ocular problem, some sort of blindness at work. But the truth is, though, I was never threatened by Linda's excellence, and she has so many great areas, and we want to highlight that and allow her to thrive in that. And so if she really is good in a particular area, why would I want to pretend that I'm going to be taking that area and leading the way if it's not my area of expertise? And so I think that for us, this was such a great adventure. And the idea of believing in each other is really ultimately the heart of this is like, what are you good at? What are you passionate about? Let's go. I'm supporting you. And it doesn't matter what anybody else thinks. If that's what we think, then let's go for it. And because at the end of the day, it's us. It's us together. That's what this is.
Well, and you said that so beautifully when I talked to you before about, your marriage is going to be unique and messy to your own marriage, and that's good, and that's okay. And I love your interaction, because that gives our marriage champions a real sense of how you interact in your new YouTube and podcast, the Chris and Linda Show. So let's talk about that, because that's coming out, and you're
I know
going to riff like you do now.
Listen, I've been to every one of my talks, and they are amazing. And this is going to be awesome. It's going to be organized because Linda has notes. And then I'm going to derail that thing so much.
That's true. Yes.
But it's been pretty funny as we've recorded some of them. I think I've shocked Linda a couple times with some really deep insights, because she said things like, wow, that was really good. Did you just come up with that? So even Linda's going to be amazed at some of the things that have come out of my mouth. Yes. But we're having fun.
Well, I think that what's exceptional about this podcast, if I may say so myself, is that we have the ability to go deep. With Chris's theology background, my psychology background, we have the ability to go deep and to base our information on something more substantial, like the church is teaching, or like really empirically founded research. Like these are important things that we don't want to be just talking heads who have our opinion about what really works. So we want it to be substantial, but at the same time, we're us, which is going to be awkward. It's going to be weird. We're going to have good stories. We love telling stories, and it's always going to be kind of funny. We're going to have lots of dogs barking, so that it's going to be very imperfect. Yes. And I think it's going to be a nice mixture. And that's kind of the feedback we get from when we do our pre-Cana. So many times we've been told or asked, do you guys have a podcast? Because they see our interaction, and honestly, we do the conversations that we have on film, like even here or on a podcast or even the pre-Canas. We do those in the car when we're driving to Starbucks. We have those conversations, first thing in the morning when we're drinking our coffee. We're always talking, always sharing, and we love having those deep moments, and having them recorded is just bonus. Really.
Yeah.
Well, tell us what our marriage champions could expect to find. What are some of the topics?
Well, we have a lot of different things, and we're also open to people suggesting topics, but there's stuff on forgiveness, who forgives first, or how do you deal with, miscommunication, and what about basically the in-laws? Are they the outlaws? We also have a ton of interviews. There's going to be stuff from like Jim and Meg Beckman and Jason Everett and Lion Deckers, and I'm hoping to get Stefanik soon. soon. I mean, I have a lot of good friends that do ministry full time. And I think it's just been curious because this is usually an area that they don't talk about a lot, which is their marriage, or what kind of tips, could you offer? So I'm trying to grab from some of these really good friends who have been married for a while and have a little bit of a story to tell. And we're getting that out of them. So it's going to be a lot of great content from us that'll be super practical, but also fun and story driven. But then there'll be a lot of tips from folks that maybe are known, or some surprises by those that are maybe not as known but have great insights.
I also think that we want it to be authentic, so not pretending that that these answers are going to be for everybody. And we also want to not skirt the hard topics. That there's a lot that's not talked about in Catholic circles when it comes to marriage, especially around the topic of sex. And so we want to address that. Maybe we haven't fully covered that in this first season, but we've touched on that a little bit, and also about just the, for fun, we've talked about the awkwardness of marriage, all those weird things that you don't really think about when you first get married, that makes marriage such a weird institution, so awkward for people to share a life together. This is who created this. This is insane. But it's fun, but it's also
what?
Like I said, awkward.
What could be awkward?
And also very helpful because people want to know, and people want to feel like they have a place they can turn to understand. Mm-hmm. So I love that. I know our marriage champions will be very much looking forward to that. You also have a course where you have the Sanctify Your Marriage course with content about spiritual, physical, emotional aspects of marriage, downloadable PDFs, prayer activities. Tell us about your course.
It's long. I mean, I think in some ways you can look at this like there's varying degrees of the amount of time and deep dives that can be given. So some of the stuff on like YouTube, like little reels, that's obviously 1 to 3 minute little shorts. We're gonna those are called marriage minutes. Then there's a little bit more of a deeper dive. This Chris and Linda shows, they're like 30 to 45 minutes, but the course content is like 3 to 5 hours. So you can go from, whatever, class to class to class. And that's the kind of thing that will be added to over time. So some of the material you can't flesh out as much in the 30-minute episode. I mean, we can do a part 2, a part 3, but sometimes people just want to kind of consume a little bit longer. Maybe they're driving and they want to hit that play and stuff like that. So we recognize that and we know that. So that's a little bit of the meaning behind the madness.
But the courses are also meant to be taken together for a couple to watch them together. And then you have the PDF that will allow for ultimately what we push. Every talk we do, it's about communication. It's about talking. Share your story with one another. Share your faith with one another. Share your dreams with one another. What just to get couples talking over and over again. And so each of these courses will encourage that, and hopefully encourage them to go to Christ together, to pray together, to learn to develop a spiritual life together. So all the supplement material is hoped to gear towards that, to invoke those conversations and ultimately a growth in intimacy through these different ways of talking and sharing.
I love that. Well, I'm all over your website. It's very conversational, very fun and easy to read, and really draws people in. One of the other things I found on your website that I thought was so interesting is your program, Meet Me at the Bar, building authentic relationships, and talk about that. I just thought that was such an interesting how you even came up with that and what that program is.
We've been thinking about this forever. Originally, when we thought about this, we thought this could be a really cool youth program. But I think what we realized at the end is that the benefit right now, and maybe the better focus is on marriages. That's where we were seeing probably the greatest problem and the greatest kind of desert. Is this, there's really not a lot there for couples. And this is structured, BAR stands for Building Authentic Relationships. So what we thought was, how do you help couples grow in their relationships individually, but also build relationships with people that are around them? In fact, the funny thing about this is that we tell our story all the time, but we could imagine how often is the case that couples are sharing their stories with others. And we realize outside of maybe an occasional business meeting or somebody comes over, it's hardly ever. And the more that we've shared our story, I think the more it grounds us into who we were and where we're going. So the building authentic relationship is ultimately like a small group dynamic. How do you lead a small group of all sorts of couples in a way that's not threatening? So we always kind of had snacks and some alcohol or drinks for those that didn't drink. And then we just mingled for like 45 minutes. And then we'd sit down and we'd ask a question or two. And the bar is structured in a way that it's like we're there with you. So the moment you're ready to dive into the question, you press play. There we are. We present the question. Here's an example of one. So what was the first impression that you had of your significant other? And then you pause that and then you share that story. And of course, Linda, when she saw me, she thought immediately like athlete and model. And so, they tell that story, and then what we do is we tell our story, and then we have the group share. So you've kind of created the opportunity for people who are willing to share their journey. And what's awesome is that by the time the evening's done, you know things about couples that maybe you sit next to at church or who are neighbors of yours in the neighborhood that you would never have known. And it just builds relationships, which is what this is all about.
Right. We started doing this in person here at our own parish and then at another neighboring parish, to where we were doing this in person at least twice a month for a long time. And it wore us down because we felt like we would say we'd want to encourage other people to become leaders, but they felt like really dependent on us. We're like, okay, we need to figure out how we can do this and not have to be there. And that's where the filming of this came along, to where any parish can have it and have that someone doesn't have to rise up to say, yeah, I'll be a leader. All they got to do is facilitate it.
Some people are super extroverted and they love the idea of hosting a meeting once or twice a month. Then we say, good, then lead the way. Now these tools are yours to utilize in whatever way you want. And we provide a year's worth of content. But the truth is that if somebody was going into year 2 or year 3, it would be easy for us to give them, here are your questions for year 2, here are your questions for year 3. So our parish, for example, does this program. We're not there physically in person, but we are there obviously through the video. And it's pretty exciting to watch that happen, to know that it works, is what I'm saying.
And you're connecting the couples to each other and to the other couples, so iron can sharpen iron in the parish. And I love how it can be, somebody can hold it at their home or someone can hold it at the parish. It's very versatile. And there's actually a downloadable step-by-step guide for how to start right there at your website, which is so easy. It lists all the things, and all the things are not that much things, but it's just so easy to do that. So I just thought that was such an interesting concept and really fun way that couples can get to, again, strengthen their marriage in an easy, super non-threatening way, incorporate you guys, and then do that. Well, since our marriage champions are in ministry, you do have one more resource specifically for people in ministry called Marriage and Ministry. It's a book. So tell us what our marriage champions might find there.
So it's called Marriage and Ministry, How to Have One Without Destroying the Other. Because we say to couples who are in ministry that they've taken out a lot, that those are two vocations that are so difficult in and of themselves on their own. But to be married and to do ministry, it's I don't know, it's tough. So we came up with this book because through all the years that we've been married in ministry, we've probably been doing, you started in ministry. It's been about 27, 28 years. And through these years, we have seen so many couples fall to the wayside. The marriages collapse left and right. And it's because they're so demanding, and because ministry is such an admirable effort. You think, I'm serving God. Of course, it's important for me to serve God. But one thing we emphasize over and over in the book is one that God can call other people to do the work that you do in ministry, but he's called you to be the father and the mother, the husband and the wife in that family. And so no one else can replace you. So there is never, we get that question a lot, how do you balance the two? And we say you don't balance. It's never a balance. It's always weighted on the side of family and marriage. That will always take precedence over ministry. God can use anybody, and he can use you again at another time and date. But right now, he's called you to your family. And so even all the years that Chris has done this, where he's been traveling, there were times early on that they were gone. The band was gone for a month. I wouldn't see them for a month. They would leave the house and not come back. But we managed to do that because we knew we were on the same page. And he when he was home, it was priority. We were his priority. And so it's such an important thing to learn to really kind of line up your values and understand what is God calling you to do. But in the end, it's marriage and family will always take precedence.
Yeah, we used to, well, I've said a lot, you can't sacrifice your marriage on the altar of ministry. And I think what happens for a lot of people is they, like, this sounds like your mother, they get too big for their britches. There has to be at work here a great humility. God doesn't have to use us, but he chooses to use us. And there's like an opportunity for us to grow. And the growth is sometimes painful and difficult. I've always felt like because Linda's never been at odds with the idea of ministry, I never felt that pull like, oh, I don't know if I should be doing this. There was always kind of we're all in, and we're in, High School Musical. We're all in this together. So if you look at the content as a whole, it's the realization and the recognition that we know everybody's at a different place in their journey, relationally, individually, with their faith, as a couple, with their faith. And so we wanted to provide content that works for people wherever they are at. The bar is pre-evangelistic. The bar is introducing people to an idea of community. And so there's no heavy, hardcore theological questions. It's all relationally based. Tell your story. What's your story? Who are you? Where are you from? What's this about? And then the truth is, from there, you can dive in. The marriage minutes, like little vignettes, little briefs. That's so funny. That's cool. I can relate to that. A little deeper dive, the Chris and Linda show. Here we go. 30 minutes. That's cool. I really like that topic. We're going some places. I haven't heard that before. And then here's Teachable. Oh my gosh, 3-5 hours. Let's do this. Like, everybody's at a different place. And so there's not one pill that fixes every marriage problem. And so I think we got a lot of work to do, and so you can speak to us about, hey, you haven't talked about this yet. We want to hear about this. And we're all in for that, because this is what we know, is that if we can address and help your marriage champions, which I love that, to be a better light and a greater witness, first and foremost to their spouse and to their children, then we're going to be unstoppable. Because I think better marriages fix our crisis in the priesthood. Better marriages provide more opportunities to change our culture. And ultimately, at the end of the day, better marriages, it's what people are looking for. They're wanting it. But unfortunately, when you have 50% of marriages ending in divorce, a lot of people are asking, why does it matter?
Well, you guys are doing more than your part to provide some of those answers and a wonderful example and leave such a great legacy. So I know our marriage champions are really excited to go look at your resources. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for asking. Nice.
Oh, marriage champions, as always, you can find out more about the Padgetts and their work at marriageinitiative.org or marriageresources.org.